Welcome to the next episode of Teaming Up. In this episode, Aidan Newbold and Casey Prentice are talking about all things internships, from what to look for as a student to running a program at a business. If you're not already, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can also watch the video version of this interview on the Hodges Partnerships YouTube channel. Now, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the latest episode of Teaming Up. Today, Aidan and I are going to talk about one of our favorite things in the world, internships. And today's conversation is going to be twofold. The first part, we're going to talk about internships through the eyes of a student. And then the back half of our conversation, we'll talk a little bit about internships from the perspective of a business and how that may look. There's a lot Aidan and I can talk about, and we will cover as much as we can. So we'll just dive right in. Aidan, kick us off, and why don't you tell us a little bit about your internship experiences when you were in college?
Great. Thanks, Casey. So I played a sport in college, so my time for internships was a little bit limited, and our college had a really great program called Externships, which we've offered at Hodges occasionally, which was like a short week-long fast track, like internship speed dating. And so I did a few of those, like really starting freshman year with a juvenile, like detention center, which is wild. You couldn't pick. You would rank your choices and then they would be like, sorry, we couldn't give you any of your choices. You're going to be with a juvenile probation officer in a detention center. And I was like, for sure. So that was interesting. I learned that maybe that was not the career for me, which is helpful with internships. Sometimes they're eliminating. So I did several of those. And then I also worked as an intern in our sports marketing department my senior year. So that was kind of my extent of internships in college to get me to where I am today.
So for people who may not know your background, you went to school at Lafayette, so out of state in Virginia, and you also were not a like quote unquote communications major. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about why pursuing externships and internships were so important, and were they for credit at Lafayette, or was that just like something you did on your own free will?
Yeah, we didn't. So at Lafayette, it was like strict liberal arts school. So in terms of majors, it didn't get very specialized, but I always liked creative things. I liked the idea of marketing and the little exposure I had. So my desire for internships, externships was to get a better taste of what being in that industry would be like, because I didn't have classes like that. I didn't write press releases in school. I have degrees in art and psychology, which I would always have to market my way into my marketing positions, like at Hodges, being like, well, psychology, I know people and how people think, which is a lot of marketing, and I have the creativity from the studio side. So I needed those experiences to have exposure to the industry. So they were really helpful for me.
That's great. And I feel like I had a similar sort of reason for why I pursued an internship. I went to East Carolina, also out of state, and I had very limited time like you. So you were limited by sports, but I was putting myself through college. I had multiple jobs. So I was like, if I have to take the time to do an internship, and it may or may not be paid, I need to make it count. And I had this thought in 2008. So when the world was collapsing, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm graduating in a year and a half. Unemployment is in the 20%. I'm never going to get a job. So what can I do to make myself shine after graduation? And what you said about the corrections position too is I think so important, is that an internship is such a validator, even if it validates what you want to do or what you don't want to do. Right. It's such a sort of moment as a student of like, this is the direction, or absolutely not. Let's scratch off all of these positions for when I want to graduate. But yeah, I love that. So from the eyes of the student, so from your externship experiences, and then kind of pulling from what we've seen when we've talked to students who've applied to Hodges, what is maybe one or two things that you would tell a student to look for in a internship if they're exploring their options?
Well, nowadays our Hodges internship is paid. And so I'd say like your time is valuable, where you can find an option that fits your interest and what you're looking in, that does pay you for your time. And like that, especially being poor college student, like you working tons of jobs, me with sports, your time is valuable. So being able to have that opportunity, that gets you through college a little bit easier is helpful. But I think to the point where any experience is going to be valuable in one way, shape, or form, whether it is, an eliminator, or whether it's, yes, this is what I'm looking for. I think for us, a lot of our students are thinking, is agency life something I'm interested in, or is going more private, working for a business or a nonprofit? So I think a lot of our students are trying to make that call. So if you're thinking through those same questions, I might look agency or private and have one or both of those experiences, because those are, we're working on 7 different accounts a day, any day. So you're always, it's fast paced, and that is a really different environment than someone who is dedicated on one project, but, maybe several different things with that one business. So those are some of the things I'd think through when you're looking. I don't know about you.
I think, so we've talked to, I think it's fair to say we've talked to hundreds of students at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, it might be helpful clarification, because Casey and I do run the internship program at Hodges, which is why we're the folks who are having the conversation today.
Yes. And we've run it together for 3 or 4 years. I ran it with a previous Hodger 3 or 4 years before that. So we've had lots of conversations, and, sometimes when you talk to a student, it's so exciting to hear their passion and their energy about their post-grad goals, and they're so excited. And when you ask a student sometimes what they want to do, they're like, oh, I want to do events, or, oh, I want to do celebrity PR. Oh, I want to do entertainment. And I think all of those are fantastic goals, but I always recommend finding an internship that aligns with some of those, because what you see on TV or what you hear from other people, sharing their stories, you may not actually like that in real life. I mean, I am a hyper detailed, organized person, and I loathe events because of the logistics and the pressure and the stress. So anytime a student says, oh, I want to do internships, I'm like, find yourself a career internship opportunity in events, and check back in with me in 6 months and see if you still like it.
I know.
Because it's crazy. Cool. So I want one more question on the internship side of things before we switch gears to employers. But with all the interviews that we've done, we've seen a lot of stellar candidates, and we've seen a lot of candidates that need a little TLC. So what are some of the mistakes that you've seen from a student who might be applying or inquiring about an internship that stick out in your brain?
That is a good question. And I think my go-to, my gut answer is doing research to prepare for the interview. I think that's how my some mistakes I see can be summed up. I think a big pet peeve of mine as an interviewer is when students don't have questions to ask people who are interviewing, just because you may not get the internship. So this, 30-minute, hour-long conversation is an opportunity to learn as much as you can, as well as, seeing if it's a fit for the internship. And it's guaranteed, I think, in any interview you go in, the interviewers are going to say, hey, like, what questions do you have for us? And we always do. And I think having good questions is also a good way to sell yourself and to show like, hey, I did really good research and I'm asking a smart question that's going to even let you know that I did that research. So that's a big one for me. And I think, also creativity with your application. I mean, of course, if you're applying to a legal position, like it may not be the time to break out like the fun cover letter, but you have to look at the job you're applying for and the internship you're applying for and the agency and the association and decide, is this like a boring cover letter? Like, does this need to be professional or can I be a little bit more creative in my writing? And that doesn't mean use slang or anything like that. But I think telling the story and hooking them in, we don't want it to just be regurgitating the resume. That's not very fun for us to read. And the fun ones stick out when you're going through a pile of 25 resumes.
Yeah, I would echo that because, spelling errors and mistakes, like we see that. And in some cases, if the creativity is there or the authenticity is there, we'll let a typo slide because we're like, well, we want to hear more from this person. Mm-hmm. But matching, I think, the vibe of your application and your cover letter to the company is so important because sometimes we'll receive cover letters that are super formal and to whom it may concern. But if you take one look at our website, I mean, we have a tone and we're so much more personable and approachable. I mean, even our internship job descriptions, like, hey, we hear you want to be an intern. That's great. So we're kind of setting the tone. And if it's not reflected back, it's like, well, did you? It's
just a missed opportunity too.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
I think I had this is like a regret that I have as someone who applied to a job. This is back, 6 years ago. But my mistake was having a really fun and colorful cover letter because, I was trying to catch their attention and make them want to interview me, even if I maybe wasn't the most qualified person for the job at the time. And I got the interview. They were like, oh my gosh, we read your cover letter and we had to bring you in. And I was like, yes, like it worked, da da da. But then I was very nervous for the interview and thinking, I had to go in and be smart and be polished and professional and answer all their questions. And I didn't bring my personality to the interview that I put in my cover letter. And I think they were like, wait, is this the person who wrote that awesome cover letter? And then she's like, hello, I'm Mrs. Business here to answer your questions. And that, I think, is a disconnect too. It's like, you got to show up for yourself, both on paper and in person.
I love that. So let's segue. So let's talk about the business side of things, because we're starting to talk about how we view students as the business representatives on the other end of the table. But before we kind of dive into the value of an internship program and maybe how it's helped us from a just operations standpoint, do you want to give a quick overview of how the Hodges internship program is structured just from a super high level perspective? Sure.
Yeah, so we have interns really all year round. There's a brief period over the holidays in December, January that is a little bit of a lag, but we really, according to the school year, kind of we have semesters of interns. So our spring interns, our fall, winter, and we, depending on the need, we've had probably anywhere from 1 to 3 interns per semester. We've changed things a little bit over time with our application, where right now we're screening candidates first based on their answers to a couple questions, as opposed to seeing a resume and a cover letter first. Just, I think, for us and any biases, it just helps blindly looking. We take away the names, take away the schools, and just look at their answers to a couple questions. Then we ask for resumes and cover letters. And then from there, we pull in folks for interviews. I think Our interns work 20 hours a week. It's a paid opportunity, and it's been a game changer, I think, for us in terms of value on many different levels. So I'm excited that we get to get into that a little bit.
Yeah. And we, the internship program has evolved over the last 20 years of our agency's being. So I buried the lead in the beginning. For people who may not know me, my one and only internship was at Hodges back in 2009. So when it was still a relatively young agency. And at that point, the internship program was almost like first come, first serve, passed a gut check, and you got a position. I remember emailing them because I had a connection in town through an ad agency my aunt worked at. And they were like, reach out to this agency. They're great. I came in for a panel interview. And before I left, I was like, yeah, you want a spot for summer? Great. But our process is so much more formal now. There's intentional recruiting. We have an actual application process. And when I interned, I didn't have necessarily a singular point of contact who was a manager. But I think what we have done now is we've eliminated the burden of one person or two people managing this program, and it's really an all hands effort. So we have people like you, and now Morgan on our team is helping to run the internship program. So you're doing the kind of like admin, you're recruiting, you're interviewing, you're coordinating all the paperwork. But then we have two more people in the agency who are serving as managers. So at any given semester, there's maybe 5 full-time Hodgers that are helping to run kind of the core of the program, but then everyone in the office is working with students. So do you want to talk a little bit about how students kind of get their work and what kind of the typical work week looks like for our interns?
Yeah, and that is something that I think the agency is nice for, because our students, I think we calculated it at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong, the number of different accounts an intern could work on. We have started having our interns track their time just like Hodgers do. It's a good practice. If you're going to go work in an agency, you better get prepared to track your time down to the half hour, 7.5 hours a day. But we've had our interns do that as well, because they're also doing a ton of great work, which we wanted to be able to show for when it makes sense with clients. And I think for them, it's helpful. But then we also see, okay, our interns are working on 20 different clients over their 3 months here. That's a lot. So I think in the week, yes, our interns have their manager, but that doesn't mean if Evans is managing an intern, that intern is only working on Evan's accounts. He's just kind of helping facilitate, being a point of contact, to help with time management and project management, and to be an advocate in the agency. But work can come from, any of the 18 Hodgers. So from media list writing to social media work, work can come from anyone. And then you work with the individual Hodger. We usually like to do weekly meetings with managers. And then the internship program has a mid-internship check-in, just to see, especially because we've been virtual the past couple months, I think just the touch point of being in person isn't there. So we really wanted to be intentional about stopping at the halfway point and checking in with our interns and hearing, are there things you're hearing on our staffing calls that you want to get involved in? Is there anything we can do to make this latter half the best latter half internship possible? So that's a little bit about the day-to-day.
Yeah. And when we were in person, so we've been hybrid the whole pandemic, but when we were in person, it still holds true. But, we've always said to students that our internship program is not a running copies, getting coffee kind of internship. We're giving assignments. We put so much value in our internship program and the candidates that we're giving assignments that we would give account coordinators and other team members if we didn't have internships in place or interns in place. So the work that our students are doing is going to be published, is going to go to a client, is part of a foundational plan or strategy. The research is going to inform something else. So I think because we put so much value and weight in our interns in the program, it has become a fantastic tool as an agency for recruitment. Because, well, for starters, again, so I was hired after my internship experience. We have a long history of hiring people from intern graduates from our program. And it's a fantastic way to test someone's abilities in this sort of safe, controlled environment. You had something similar too with Hodges, right? You were contracted for a period of time.
Yep. It was a 3-month contract period. And then I was hoping at the end of it, I'd get that offer. But yeah, there are many of us who have had similar. Amanda at our office had an internship around the same time. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a test drive. And I think too, we've found the work of our interns to be great. So we don't have to have them doing running copies. That's just not the experience we want for them, but it's also helpful selfishly a little bit for us in terms of extra hands to do some of this writing work or research. So we are thankful and grateful for our awesome students that we bring on, because they do some great work.
And I love how it has just kind of laterally expanded our network, most definitely in Richmond, but beyond. And some examples of that is we just had a wave of hiring last year with entry-level account coordinators. And while we didn't necessarily hire anyone who has been through our internship program, former interns were saying, oh, have you talked to this person? Or, oh, I sent someone else your way. So we have built this network of advocates. And then some of our interns have become clients because they've moved to another agency and they've said, oh, have you talked to Hodges? So it's been a really, not only are we doing something that we're passionate about working with students, trying to get them into the field, give them experience, but we're also being a little bit selfish and adding people to our team for a temporary period of time, building our network and kind of fostering those relationships, which is kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis, much less just an internship program. So I want to be mindful of our time. This episode has gone by so fast, and I feel like you and
I always do. I feel like I could talk for an hour.
I know, and there's so many things that we haven't covered off on how we've evolved the program. So maybe there's a bonus episode later this semester, and we can even pull in some interns. But let's close this conversation for any businesses who may be thinking like, great, like I understand, but I can never operationalize something like this. I don't have the time for it. What are some kind of closing words for businesses that are like, I'd like to help, but I don't even know how to get started?
I think the way that Hodges structures our program, like with having myself, you, Morgan, having a dedicated team to take the time intentionally. I think it's always hard to find time. And I'm sure that's resources. Time is a sticking point for businesses. So really investing in the program by saying, yes, Aidan, Casey, I know you're working on different clients and billing for that work, but this is important to us. Use time in your day to foster this and grow this program. I think that's helpful. I also think there's a lot of, once you get it set up and running, it's much easier. Like the semesters get easier. You can duplicate the application form. You can, when you submit, that the application is open to schools, you can literally hit duplicate and then it goes to, all of Virginia's schools in a certain network. So I think, it seems like a mountain, but once you kind of get over that first inaugural year of it gets much easier. And I think because the value makes it worth it too. I would not put this work into an internship that was running copies and getting coffee. It would not be worth it. I'd be like, why am I doing this? I can make the copies, Yeah. But I think because our interns, it's such a valuable experience, making it a valuable experience, having real work that they are helping you with and that they also can add to their portfolio makes the time and effort worth it, because it's extra set of hands, and it's, great fodder for their resume and for future applications.
Yeah. And I would add, just to start small. I mean, like, this is for anything, but, Hodges started with just like, you had to kind of know that we had internships. It wasn't promoted. Right. It wasn't on the website. You kind of had to be part of the circle. And it's expanded over time as the program has grown and it's been more successful. And we've seen a lot of students come through, and there's some of my favorite, if I can play favorites, but the ones who have worked with an employer to kind of create this own kind of opportunity to add an internship on top of their day job. And an example, we had a former intern who worked at a restaurant here in town, and he was a bartender, but he also saw an opportunity to say, like, hey, can I do a couple of social posts a week? And that helped really kind of foster his resume. And he was such a standout candidate for us because he was so personable and he had this bank of work. And it wasn't a paid internship, but he was a subject matter expert. So when he was producing content, it felt authentic and real and not forced. And it was sort of low risk for the restaurant because they're like, well, this person knows what they're talking about. And it, was sort of low risk, high payoff kind of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd start with you could add a line to your website saying, we love students. We love working with students. If you're interested in shadow opportunities, and then it's not a formal thing, then it's have a student reach out and go one at a time and grow. It's been a minute for Hodges. So we've got it whipped into shape at this point.
Excellent. Well, Aidan, it was a pleasure. Thanks for joining me. I feel like by the time this episode airs, we'll have a deadline coming up for internships. So we'll be sure to include the link to our internship page in the show notes and description. But thanks for joining me.
Yeah, always fun chatting, Casey.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.